Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining me and my guest today. And if you've listened before, thank you for tuning back in. And actually, if you listened before, you may have heard my guest today. She appeared on episode 164, which aired on 10/17/23, From Betrayal and Loss to Manifesting Joy. And today, Amy Douglas we're going to dive deep into human design. And I'm so excited for this conversation because I wanted to be able to provide listeners who are curious and interested in learning their human design, what that means for them, and apply it to grief, because that's really what this podcast is about. And so that you can have another tool in your toolbox for information and knowing yourself. And I think that's really been my mission, my personal mission for myself for several years now, since probably 2014. And I'm all about any tool that helps me to better understand myself, my tendencies, how I'm wired, how I show up in the world, where I might falter, what my bald spots, what my blind spots might be, right? It's information, and we can't change something we don't know or acknowledge, right? Isn't that what Dr. Phil says? We can't change what we don't acknowledge. So
Yes.
anyway, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast, and I'm excited to dive in. So let's do it.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here again and talking about, a subject obviously that's very near and dear to my heart. So, I I see so much to be offered to your listeners, to the collective, to anyone who is ready to take a deep dive into their own personal journey. And while if you've listened to the episode, that we aired together on the 17th of October, I shared parts of my journey that has led to, different periods of time where I've experienced, grief and trauma and loss and just and I think once I really shined the spotlight on myself, when you're going through things, I can only speak to you, Victoria, and your listeners about my personal experiences. Of course, I can with any clients I've worked with as well, but my journey is the one that I can be the most vulnerable and authentic in sharing. And I think there were a lot of years where I would project what was happening in my life onto someone else or something else. Like there was very much a very conditional cause and effect of how I was operating in the way that I was allowing myself to experience life. And I think those words are important, allowing myself, because we all get to choose how we are experiencing life. And until we empower ourselves to create awareness on what we're doing, wow, blame and projection and all that seems pretty simple. But when you turn and put the focus on yourself and say, all right, what role am I playing and what's going on? And I think that was a huge catalyst in 2016 for myself of what I started doing. I was just like, all right, I can only control. And again, anytime I use that word, it is in the highest vibration, because as I shared, control as a manifester is one of the 4 core wounds. So I don't want to be controlling and I don't want to be controlled, but control in this scenario is I am only responsible for my actions, my beliefs, and how I am choosing to be. And when I brought human design, well, when it came to me and I was ready to allow myself to dig into it, it shined so much of that spotlight on how I was allowing myself to show up in the world. And because my belief system is we choose this for ourselves before we're even brought into the world, I could see where I was not empowering myself to align with what I chose. And that can really hold energy in the body. The body graph is very much about the body. And grief can be held in a lot of areas if you're not aware. And so the gift is once you become aware, then you get to do something about it and you can no longer be unaware.
Mhm. And I think that's where the challenge is, and the fear is for a lot of people to do really deep introspection or reflection work, because once you acknowledge it, then you do have a, then it's like you can feel powerless and you can feel like you don't have a choice. But then once you realize you do, not doing anything is a choice too. Right.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Oh, yes. Anytime somebody tells me I'm stuck, and please, there's no disrespect here. I'm not diluting what anyone is experiencing, but stuck is also a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's okay if you're choosing that, but let's just not choose it forever, right? Let's really attune ourselves to what we can do for ourselves. And I think oftentimes we look outside of ourselves for other people, other systems, other something or other to quote unquote fix. And while I am happy to have as many tools in my tool belt and toolbox as there possibly can be, it really starts with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's always me versus me. And so human design just gave me language to where I could look for how I might not be in alignment for what I chose for myself, which, in the world of grief can be, where am I not letting myself deal and process, or where am I inviting myself to escape from? One of the gates has the potential for addiction. And so that's very real. If you've experienced something traumatic and you don't want to feel it and you don't want to deal with it, I have some of the energy in my design, because I shared in the last episode, I'm a 35-year recovering binge eater, that was my go-to. I have that activation in my design. So it's almost affirming. Okay, I'm not, it's like, oh, okay, I see where this shows up. But now that I know, when I get activated by something, I then have power to choose what I do with that. I've done it so much of my work. It's like, I almost laugh at it now. Like, ha ha ha, there you are again.
And that's gate 35 with
Oh,
addiction.
well, gate 24 is the addiction gate. That's
Okay.
the ajna. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's, it's a processing thing. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much mental processing in the ajna. That's one of the center of the 9 centers in the human design body graph. And that, I must make sense of this. I must do this. There's something that has to be done. Da, 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 da. It's an awareness center. Awareness centers do not mean that you have to do. It is about being aware. And so if you're tired of not knowing what to do about it, that constant spinning, then we see sometimes people choosing to numb out from it, right? And that's very real. So there's no shame in it, but the awareness is important of it, because I've heard so many times from all the beautiful people in my life that I've been able to work with, they'll say something like, and there's, again, I'm not diluting this, but something was modeled for them. My dad was an alcoholic. My, such and such was this and this. And so they feel like because that was modeled, that's what they chose. But when I can show them that there's actually something in their chart, all of a sudden they feel like, okay, then it's something that I can manage and navigate. And that feels different than what has been conditioned upon us, because conditioning happens from everything outside of us, all of our experiences, everything we witness, hear, see, feel, all of those things. And while there's a lot of gifts in a lot of that, it also shows us and tells us how we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to be doing. And we actually get to navigate that for ourselves. We're all so incredibly unique.
And that's where those belief systems come in, right? Like I believe that I must be destined for this life because that's what's always been. Like my father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, they were all alcoholics. So this must just be just part of the ancestral pattern that continues, right? And I want to come back to something you mentioned with the ajna, the head center, being, like the hamster on the wheel, the spinning energy.
Yes.
Just in biofield tuning, that often shows up on the other, depending on which side of the head it's on, the spinning, the masculine or the feminine, the right or the left. The opposite hip people generally can have hip issues on the opposite side. So that spinning pattern can show up as this energy of manifesting itself in the hips. So I just wanted to share that briefly too, that everything's
Biofield,
connected.
everything is connected. I had biofield tuning done for the first time when I was in Costa Rica doing my human design reader training, which was magical. And I was blown away by that experience. And boy, you were spot on. You were speaking right to me when you shared that, because I carry a lot of that in my hips. And she spent a lot of time with me. And then of course I was so, what's the word I want to use? Naive. I was like, oh my God, I feel fantastic. Like, this is great. Like, I'm so grateful for you. I think I joked, not even knowing that I was joking, that, I was fixed. And she just kind of laughed at me. She's like, so this was just one session.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to go back to your ways and it's all going to be, whatever. But it was really, it was very enlightening and so brilliantly orchestrated for me to learn more about myself. So yeah,
So,
that modality is no joke, very powerful.
and it's all about science too, which I geek out on. So let's let people, when people are looking for at their human design, which they can get at mybodygraph.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. When they're first looking at their body graph, and it for me too, like I think I looked into it maybe over a year ago, and it was a lot. It's overwhelming. It's like, okay, well, great. I'm a manifestor. So what? you know? But I think what I've uncovered as I've been diving back into it recently is how it's impacted my relationships, like learning about how my design rubs up against others people's design, right? Like how we show up in relationships. That has been that's been like mind-blowing for me, to have a certain awarenesses around my energy of, what's the word, initiating others, and that impact that can have, and not really understanding that power that my energy holds too. And how, as a manifester, like yourself, how this aura that we have, um it it's not easily penetrated, and which explains why my circle is very small, right? Like I surround myself with like small quality relationships rather than quantity. Um, so I've been personally learning a lot, which has been really fun, and it really is an experiment, right? It's an experiment. Like once you know this stuff, like experimenting with it and seeing how it shows up. So I'll shut up now, looking at their human design, what are some areas that can you speak to the different energy centers, whether they're defined or undefined, and how that relates to grief?
Yes, yes. So there are 9 different centers. So everybody has a body graph that holds 9 centers. What's different and unique is what your activations are. And what that means is if you have certain things, quote unquote, lit up or defined, there's color to them in your design. And so of the 9 centers, each one holds a very specific energy within it. And I love to get people really in tune with the energy that's offered in each of the centers. If that's something that you're just wanting to kind of get just your feet wet with, that's a really good place to just kind of start understanding it, because language can be used that you understand. So we'll just start at the top of the house, the head center. The head center is a pressure center, and it's a very curious center. Whether you're defined or not, if you're defined, you have consistent, clear access to the energy in that center. And this is where inspiration and our questions come from. And so I want you to think, you, Victoria, have it defined. I do not. So oftentimes you don't necessarily need to you're not observing necessarily what's going on outside of you and how this speaks to grief, where I am very attuned to what's going on in my world, because it's where I get inspired. Your inspiration comes from within you. So I want you to hear how grief can get trapped. This is, again, my perspective. This is not the law. Each person, that's what I love about design. It's your own experiment. It's your own experience. But the way that I see grief can get trapped here, or that you can present with it, is, again, it's this, I have all these questions, and for you, you're stuck in your own sense of questioning, and there's a loop that happens. And for me, it's like, everybody else must know the answer to this. Everybody else, and So either you're looking outside or you're trapped within. And that's kind of, where grief can sit there. And this is going to be a pattern you're going to hear as I go through these 9. So then we'll move down to the ajna. The ajna is the center that answers the questions that come in the head. And it's an awareness center. So it's not the same pressure that's in the head. I must do the thing. I must get the answer. This is I must conceptualize everything that's coming through. You, Victoria, have it defined. I do not. So you're just spinning with conceptualizing, like, why do I have this grief? Why is it still here? What does this mean to me? Why can't I move past it? Da, da, da. And I'm pretending to be certain about, well, this is why, and this is what I need to do, right? Like I'm kind of like glossing over it, not letting myself sit with it as much. And the awareness of it, I'm not sure what the hell to do with it. That's just through truth. And you know what to do with it. And yet what you're doing with could be on a spin cycle. It could be that energy of stuckness. Okay.
Is this where that Pollyanna kind
Oh,
of?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So then the throat center is our manifestation center. It's our communication center. It's how we let out what's going on in our body to the rest of the world to know what's happening. This is such an important center as it relates to grief. So whether you're defined or defined, we often have a very consistent way of articulating what we're experiencing. As manifestors, sometimes it's going to come out as anger, especially when we're misaligned. And so just watch out for that. It's not personal, right? Especially if we have emotional authority, and I'm tacking layers on, you hear some conditions to this, but it's just, there are layers to this system. I'm trying to make it just really user-friendly and digestible. But if someone has this undefined, they are great at speaking on behalf of others, but this is really important to empower yourself that it's safe to share. Find the platform. For me personally, with my design, I want to process it myself a lot before I'll let someone else in. And whom, very much to your point, we keep a very small circle, Victoria, and that's okay. It's okay. It's important. It's how we protect ourselves. And that's our unique, auric type as a manifester. A manifesting generator would have a million people they're going to talk to about it, right? There's just like the more the merrier, right? Type of thing. So there are layers to helping you identify how you can empower yourself to move that energy, that emotion out of your beautiful communication center to allow you, because oftentimes what happens is when we hear it come out, we're like, we can then have an opportunity to have a reflection. No different when we're sharing it with someone else. It empowers them to have an objective perspective. So really choose wisely, right? You don't want someone that's trying to manipulate your situation. Oh, you just need to get over it. That is not the person. That is not the person that you want to share this with.
So can I ask quickly then, is
Always.
that the splenic speaking? Because we're emotional. I'm an emotional authority. You're an emotional authority. So when we hear you should just get over it, is that a splenic authority speaking with the defined throat? Or not necessarily?
I think it's just somebody who's deeply conditioned that it's not okay to speak your truth and what you're going through. And so I don't want to, because someone who's splenic could also just be such a beautiful presence for them to reflect something back to you in a very safe space container. Splenic authority people are just like super in the moment. But they're not going to be someone that's going to necessarily spout out something that could potentially be just like limiting. That feels limiting. Just get over it. It feels very limiting. Like you're not even giving me the space to want to share what I'm experiencing. So I don't want to label it as, because I'm sharing that feels hard and harsh, right? And our designs have the opportunity to have low vibe and high vibe. That's just all there is to it. And so while someone could express it either way, I don't want to put parameters necessarily around, where the definition is.
That makes sense. I almost feel like a splenic, it's almost like they're almost the type that they may not speak all the time, or they may not be the one that's always talking, but yet when they talk, people listen.
Yes. Definitely. And again, the worst thing we can do for someone that does have splenic authority is ask them, are you sure? Because it's so in the moment. And you and I, who have emotional authority, asking us, are we sure? It's kind of like a joke. Well, hell, I don't know. This is just kind of how I feel. It feels really real, and really, I feel really sure about it at the moment, but let's check back with me. That's why we say there's no truth in the now. but it feels very true for us in the moment. So that communication center is so important. Now, if you have this undefined, it's important to surround yourself with people that will give you the spaciousness to not limit how long it takes you to get to what you're wanting to share. You and I, Victoria, we're succinct. We're probably going to whip it out in no time, but someone that has an undefined throat has a lot that they may, come around and dance around it a little bit and then come back. And that's okay. And it's beautiful. But again, it's really empowering yourself to surround yourself with someone that, is aligned to listen to what you're allowing yourself to get out. And then you're going to have ahas from it. And if you have that safe, trusted person, they're going to have some really, deep reflections for you. That's why talk therapy, coaching scenarios, that kind of thing helps you. I can't see inside my own glass. So journaling, inviting myself to audio, file what I'm going through helps me see it, but it's still my glass. Letting someone else help shine the light on what I'm experiencing is so important. Such a big piece of releasing grief, right?
Ooh, that was good.
Good. Okay. G center. G center is all about your sense of direction, sense of who you are, where you're going. And, grief here can be trapped in, I don't know who I am now that I don't have this person in my life, or I've had this, loss or breakup, or, fill in the blank with whatever it is. And I'm lost without them. And, I do not have a defined G center, nor do you, Victoria. And we're kind of meant to quote unquote feel lost. And that's okay, because there are breadcrumbs that lead us to the next thing that we're meant to experience. But this is where we could get locked into that cycle of like, oh my gosh, I can't exist now. I can't do this. And that is so not true. It's not true. It's a story we're telling ourselves. And so when you start to hear that kind of thing, it's like, oh, okay. And then for someone that might have it defined, who's always been on a certain path and always, known who they are and expressed themselves that way, and then they get jolted out of that reality, they could be in a spin cycle too, because now they don't have their own sense of self. And this is where I'm going to come back to. This is the deep self-work that is necessary. Like, I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I love myself. Those are the things that come out of that beautiful G center. So really inviting yourself to connect back to that in whatever practice feels aligned for you. Then we move on to the beautiful, powerful heart center. The heart center, one would think this is where, holds all of our emotions. No, this is our willpower. And this is our enoughness. I like to call it the enoughness center. And so just think about that. I mean, we could just put a pin in it right there. If you already are experiencing something in your life that is traumatic, or, whether it's loss, whether it is just, anything that just feels really, really hard. Somebody that doesn't have this defined like me, Victoria, you do. My go-to is, well, I wasn't worthy of it, or I didn't deserve it, or, I'm not enough type of energy. I must prove myself for that to be my thing. And that could be a really shitty spin cycle for someone who's experiencing grief and trauma, and trying to move through something. Where for you that has it defined, you could go in a bit of a spin cycle too of, this is not what I wanted for myself. This is not what I desired. How did I allow this to happen? Right? Like, it's that control thing. There's a lot of control energy, controlling of resources, that kind of thing, controlling of my community in the heart center. And so if you feel out of control of it, for someone who has that defined, you can start telling yourself stories with that too. And I hope what everybody's hearing, I'm here now in the 5th of 9 centers. Again, so much is this of you, what you're empowering yourself to believe about yourself. And guess what? The gift of that is, the only work that has to be done is on you, because we cannot control anything around us. We cannot control the media, which I don't even listen to. I'm not even on social media hardly ever. So we could have a whole episode on what those things do to get trapped in someone's body. So if you want to start somewhere, shut that shit off in your life and allow yourself to be with you, period. My sister, my oldest sister, who's a splenic manifester, just went on a 7-night silent retreat to shine the light on herself for what she's like, I'm 56. I'm done with this. I'm going to work on it. And I gave her some little pointers, which was fun, but it's important that we give ourselves the spaciousness to focus on ourselves. And so with every center I'm going through, I want you to hear, this is what you can do for you. I want so many of anybody that's willing to listen to understand this work can be done on yourself to heal. It's so important. And so while we look outside of ourselves a lot, when you shine the light within, it's important that we give ourselves the spaciousness to do that. Then we move on to the emotional solar plexus. Such a fun center. 51% of the population has this defined. So you're either defined or you're with somebody around somebody that's not, right? So this is where all those emotions and those feelings and those moods, and just, it could be a very tumultuous center. It's packs a punch for sure. And so what I want to say here is, first and foremost, if you're defined, I want you to celebrate it. I definitely resisted celebrating it because you are wired and mechanically built to process your emotions. You are built for this. If it is undefined, it doesn't mean you're not built for this. What I want you to do first and foremost is to check in with yourself if the emotions that you're feeling are even yours. Because when you're undefined in this center, you are feeling it. The magnitude of it is amplified by anyone around you that does have it defined. So think about a grief cycle if there's a loss in the family and you're the only one that doesn't have that center defined, and that people around you are processing their emotions. They're spitting them out, sharing them, that kind of thing. And it doesn't feel safe for you to do that, but then you're feeling the emotions of everyone else amplified. I have a perfect example of this. I shared in the last episode that my beautiful sister's husband passed away right after my dad did. And her precious, at the time, 16-year-old daughter was the one that found her dad in the shower, gone. Bless her heart. And this my beautiful, precious niece has, really had a road to go of, because her daddy was everything, right? And she is the only one in her little immediate family that has a defined solar plexus. My sister and her son, so, my niece's brother, do not have a defined solar plexus. Okay. So every time something was happening in her life and what she was experiencing, when she was going to express it, my beautiful sister was there just holding her with it. But my sister was amplifying what she was experiencing, and her daughter felt as though she had to comfort her own mom, right? Because it was just like, it was so much for my sister. And because we are built to navigate it, then we kind of take over the soothing and the comforting. And so another way for you to look at and shine a light on, how am I moving through my emotions? Am I sure that they're mine? Am I taking on that of others? Wow. In a grief scenario, if we could shine a light, there's 2 centers and that I want to touch on. And this one is a huge one, that to do with feelings and moods and emotions and what you're going through. So knowing this could be a huge catalyst for how you allow yourself to process what you're going through. And there are so many ways to allow yourself to move through it, but just the awareness alone is going to be really key.
Do I have it defined? I don't
You
remember.
do. Yeah, because that's what
makes
us emotional. Yeah. We have
So,
that beautiful 35, 36.
yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying in a nutshell is those that have it defined become the emotional caretakers.
Because we're kind of built for it. But
Yeah.
then can you imagine the person who doesn't, what they're feeling? They're feeling it like on steroids. And it's not like those of us aren't feeling it that way too. I'm not trying to minimize it, but we're mechanically built to allow ourselves to process it. And someone that doesn't, they're not, consistently wired to process it. And then they're feeling the impact of everybody else around them that is, consistently wired. So then they're like, ah. So really important to identify, is this mine? Must I carry this? Or can I lovingly put it on that soft little fluffy cloud and let it move on by? And then I can sit with and be me again. And so it's like allowing yourself to truly physically move out of the energetic space of those that have it defined, so that you can check back in with yourself. Am I okay? Is this mine to carry? Is this mine to process? Do I have to do anything with this? Because you don't. And by the way, those that have this undefined, the solar plexus undefined, you really avoid conflict and confrontation anyway, and sometimes truth, because it's hard. You don't like, what do I do with it? Where those of us have it defined, aligned, deconditioned, we're like, I'm hitting this head on, right?
Mhm.
And I avoided this, you guys. I'm not trying to make this sound so simple. I avoided my emotions for years. I stuffed it down with food so deliciously so I didn't have to deal with it. And, I'm grateful that that was a tool I had in my tool belt to provide me comfort. And now I want to do it in a way that feels so much more empowering and not filled with guilt and shame, because, anybody that has had a challenging relationship with eating and food, don't want to feel shame for what they choose to fuel their body with, right? So there's a lot of letting go there as well. I had a lot of grief of letting go of my relationship with food, for sure, because it had been such a tool I'd used to comfort myself for so long. So then it's like, crap, what do I use now?
Mm. Well, and look at where the solar plexus is, right?
Yeah.
The whole
Oh,
gastrointestinal
yes.
stomach, like, the organs that are there, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is
Yes.
this
Yes.
where is this the center where we see projection manifest too? Is this where
Say more.
so like if I'm projecting my feelings onto other people,
Oh,
is
yes.
this where that's coming from? And is that
Yes.
more apt to be someone who's defined versus
Yes.
undefined? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because undefined is just kind of like I'll have my undefined people in my life reach out to me and they'll be like, how are you feeling today? Even my son, who is also defined, but our designs are so similar. He'll like send me a text, Mama, how are you feeling today? Anything going on? Because we like channel each other's, my daughter, my son, and I, we channeled each other's stuff. My son was nauseous like the whole time my daughter was pregnant. It's just
Mm.
like, you can't make this stuff up. And so he's just checking in. Even though all three of us are emotionally defined, we can still feel that. It's just we have a more consistent way to process it, especially once we're more aware. That's the key. Awareness is
Can
such
I
a
ask too, like, is this where someone would think that they might be highly sensitive or like,
yes, empathetic, like an empath.
empathic?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So,
yes.
okay.
So highly sensitive empath typically equals not defined.
Mhm.
Right? Because the theory, although I would say I'm very sensitive, I'm Pisces, I'm very
Yeah,
sensitive,
same.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
And I
asking.
would say that I'm definitely an empath. Hello,
Mhm.
I'm here, I'm a healer. I'm here to help others. I know that. And yet, of course I am, because I'm not so depleted because I have the consistent, way of allowing myself to process it. Now, it took practice. So please, if you're listening and you're like, I do not feel that way, neither did I in the beginning.
I
But
didn't either.
right, it took practice. But the person who has this undefined is just like, whoa, and they feel it and they take it on, and it can manifest as things in their body for sure. Like, adrenals can just go shot. And, it's important to really check in um, on, is this yours to carry or not? And I really empowered myself to create a practice when I was done with a client session of just, this isn't mine. I'm going to send them some energetic love. They are fully equipped to handle this and move through this. And, I'm here to support them, but it is not mine to carry going forward, because there were, in the beginning, I definitely carried it. Okay, the beautiful sacral center. So 70% of the population has this defined. Victoria and I do not. Okay. So this is the powerhouse. This is the life force energy, the generational, let's go, go, go type of thing. I can do the thing. And so someone that has this defined, which is likely, the dominating, parts of your listenership. I mean, that's just, the population, that's how it is. They often, how grief can set with them is, I shouldn't be still dealing with this, right? Like I must do the thing to move through it. This is where escapism can often set in. From my perspective, this is what I have witnessed. I shared very briefly, but my partner lost his son in 21, his middle son, to an ATV accident at the young age of 20, and my partner has a defined sacral. And so you kind of just want to go and do, just use that energy, do. And my invitation for someone is, while I want you to move through, but I don't want you to escape from it. And so just really checking in with, am I using this energy, this fuel to my highest good? Am I using this in a healthy way? And those of us that don't have it defined, it's this feeling of, I'm not doing enough. Another enough, center. And so just checking in, I'm moving through what I am experiencing at my pace, and it's beautiful. And then for the person that, has the equipped energy, are we trying to escape from anything here? Am I just constantly being busy so I don't have to deal with this? And I would say I showed up in my life as a manifesting generator until I knew I was very conditioned to show up that way. And this is exactly, I dismissed my emotions and I just stayed busy, because if I stayed busy, I didn't have to deal with it. Right. And so I was very misaligned with how I was using, my beautiful design. Okay. The spleen, we touched a little bit on, but this is that second center that can really, really impact how you're processing and empowering yourself to move through grief, because the spleen is primal instinct. It's your health. It's your well-being. It's what must I do to survive? And the spleen is with the area that we tend to hold on to things that are no longer serving us. So I want you to think about this from the perspective of, if you're holding on to the life that you had before the traumatic experience occurred, then you're not letting yourself move forward. And whether it's defined or not, we can definitely hold on to things, but it is a lot more common for someone who has this undefined to be living in a very fear-based state and not letting themselves move through what's no longer serving them. It's great to hold on to the memories, but it is time to live in the present. And the spleen is very present, moment to moment. And so it's inviting you to process where you are in the exact moment that you're at. And it's another awareness center. It's a very powerful awareness center, because it can empower you to shine the light on, what am I doing right now? Is this serving me? What can I do to empower myself to move forward? Like, one of the gates, is like fear of repeating the past. And so if you're stuck in a spin cycle of, I created this trauma in my life that I'm now grieving from, but I'm afraid to do anything else because, what if I repeat the same thing that I just did? And the thought process is your spleen is there to tell you in the moment to moment what is best for you. Are you willing to listen? Can you shut off your head center telling you, you must do this, you must do that? Can you shut off if your emotions, can you not shut them off, but can you navigate those long enough to allow yourself to hear what the spleen is telling you? Because it's always guiding you to your highest truth. The low vibe of is we don't listen, we dismiss it. It's that sixth sense, you guys. It's the one that we're taught to dismiss. It's the one that you're like, your hair stands up and you're like, why did that happen? But we can't describe, we can't defend it. And this is the area that we don't want to ask, are you sure? Right? Because it is so, it's intuitive, but it's also very, like I said, it's in the moment, it's instinct, it's primal. And so if you're holding a lot of grief in this area, forward movement probably isn't occurring. So what's not serving you? What could I do different in this very moment? And am I letting whatever is going on in my head, dictate what I'm doing? Because we're not meant to make decisions anywhere above the throat.
Oh, and if you have a defined ajna, and then you have an open solar plexus, like that's like a, it's like a triple threat.
Yes. Again, we chose this, so we're not trying to say, oh God, if anybody's looking at their design, they're like, shit, now I have that. No. This is awareness. Okay, now I know, and I'm not going to do this going forward, right?
Yes.
Everybody's design, it was beautifully orchestrated the way that you chose, and it's so unique. And so let's empower ourselves to attach to it in a way that invites us to move in the direction of the alignment that we, really ultimately created for ourselves. The last center is the root center. Anybody that knows anything about the chakra system, this is that grounding center, but it's also a pressure center. It's the pressure to do. It's the pressure. And what I see as potential grief in this center, and the body parts that it's connected to, definitely has to do with not taking any kind of action. No, like, I'm going to just stay, quote unquote, stuck. The pressure is there for me to do something different, but I don't know what to do with it. And if you have it undefined, you're likely feeling pressure from everything outside of you. And if that doesn't feel aligned, that's because it's not your pressure. Again, anything that's not defined, it's coming from outside of you. Check in if it's yours. And this root pressure to do, to be, to act, to, whatever, it's meant to be for your highest good. So just check in. And this is another one of those kind of timing things. It's a timing center. I have it defined. I feel pressure all the time, but mine is connected to my spleen. So mine is not talking to my solar plexus at all. And so mine is connected to my spleen, which is moment to moment. And so oftentimes my pressure is truly movement, to move through things, to take action on things. And from a grief perspective, I can also share that I felt like this, because I don't have the defined sacral. This is kind of probably where I felt the moment to moment, I must do something, because whatever I was doing wasn't serving me. And I was aware of that from my spleen. And so I might, let's move, where maybe giving myself the spaciousness to sit in some stillness and process what I was experiencing before I just let myself jump and go do something, because there was a little bit of escapism in that center for me, when the absence of the sacral. So I know that was a lot, but it just the energy of understanding that can be such a catalyst for your own healing. I mean, it's such a beautiful journey anyway. And giving yourself the spaciousness to learn some of this can be a real game changer. I'm living proof,
And can we speak to a little bit of the gate? Was it 3664? Or is that, oh no, the gate of crisis, which is that?
36. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
gate 36,
gate
gate of
36.
crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we speak to that a little bit? Because if people are, because this is about grief, right?
Yeah.
So
Gate 36 is my main sun gate. And what that means for anybody when they're looking, it's the most prominent energy in my design. Okay. It's what I chose for myself, and it's in the solar plexus, and I have the solar plexus defined, because you can have your main sun gate in a center that's not defined. That's beautiful too. Different journey. And so, even like I shared in our past episode, it's not that I feel like I just navigated a ton of really tumultuous, chaotic crises in my life. But then when I go to share them with people, they're usually just like blown away. And I'm like, oh, but I'm really built for this. What's important for me is to share my emotional experiences, how I have navigated them with others. That is literally that's what people need from me. Your main sun gate is the energy that people need from you. And so my 36, what they need is for me to share what I have experienced and navigated, which, by the way, I didn't do. I didn't even tell anybody in my family I was getting divorced. Right. Like I am one that I kind of hermit when things are going on. And I'm really, while I know why I do that. It's my 1222 energy, which is also an emotional, wave. But it's important for me to kind of glean what I'm experiencing before I'm ready to articulate it to the other. And then once I do, it gives permission to others to navigate their own. Because when we're silent about these things, and remember, I had built a facade that made it look like I had everything figured out and everything was fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Everything's always fine. I can handle this. I can do this. I mean, that's the energy I held, which was so not true. I was completely broken on the inside. But now I see that this 36, this gate of crises, is really important for me to share what I have gone through. So if you have this activated in your design, you're built and you're wired for these things. And you often may not feel like it has been a, perpetual crisis in your life. I joked with Victoria before we started today. The morning started out with a couple of crises, and I literally just gave myself a moment of, okay, cool. That's how we're starting today. I see you. I'm going to put you on a bookshelf and I'll come back to you, because I have things. But that has been so much work that has empowered me to get to that point, of recognizing, acknowledging this is what I'm built and wired to do. So if it is defined in your body graph, you're wired for it. If it's not defined, you're probably going to feel it a bunch more when you're around somebody that it is. And it probably feels harder, and that's okay. It's okay. That's what you chose. So let's find a way to help you navigate through it.
So if someone is looking, let's say someone's listening and they're looking at their body graph and they're looking at their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
So how what are some things that you look at as a body graph reader when you're looking at relationships?
Oh, it's one of my favorite things to do. It's so fun to help someone really shine a light. We call them connection charts. Okay. So that's where we have the opportunity to put two body graphs together and see how they relate, interact, connect. And when we do that, there you have each individual on each side, so that we're all individual. But then when we come together, you get to see the gift of what happens in that dynamic. And I like to tell people there are what's called like attraction channels. They're these electromagnetic sparks. So it's like you have a gate that marries to a gate of mine that then we connect and then it lights up two centers. And it's just like, oh, we feel like you complete me, that Jerry Maguire bullshit, right? Like nobody completes us people. We're all complete humans, but it can really feel like, oh my God, you get me. And then like you and I, Victoria, we both share a channel. So you and I both have the 35-36. So like we get each other. We can talk about that. But then there are ones that can be more dominating. So you've got the whole channel, or the compromise, where you've got the whole channel and I just have one part of it, not the whole thing.
Mm.
That compromise is where I really like to pull people and just help them create awareness. I know I've said that word. We could probably put a counter out there for this is where friction could occur, because you're dominating in this area and I have a snippet of it, but you're trying to pull me to believe your way of seeing this. And while I'm happy to witness the way that you see it, but it doesn't have to, I don't have to see it your way. And can you imagine the conflict that happens in just that area? And then, like with those electromagnetics and the things, it's like all of a sudden, if your partner didn't have a defined spleen, but being with you, they do, they're probably going to feel really safe with you. Like it's just, it shines a light on how we support one another. And then there's the potential for our own growth in our journey. And I always offer it. Like as soon as I learned design, I did my son and his girlfriends and my daughter and her now husband. And I was like, okay, you guys, now look, I am helping shine a light on potential friction in the future. But now that you have awareness for it, there doesn't have to be any friction. And I'm not trying to be like Pollyanna, sunshine and puppies, right? We still are humans. But oftentimes the conflict that arises is based on our conditioning. It's like, oh, we had a core wound there. You just hit on it. This is where we get that opportunity. Communication is everything in relationship. And so when you can see this, like I often do this as gifts, for people that get married. Like, okay,
Oh,
people, this is
lovely.
what I see, and so I'll just do a recorded thing. Now, some of them want to do it live, which is great because they want to ask questions. But oftentimes the husband is not nearly as into it. No offense to any of your male listeners, but they're like, look, I got this figured out. But then the ahas that come out of it are just, I did it for one couple and literally she was like, she wanted me to find all these things. She's like, oh my God, this annoys me about him and this and this. Can you touch on these things so he'll stop doing that? And as it turned out, she was such a controlling force and he had an undefined throat and hers was defined. She was speaking over him, for him, all the things. And so I shined a light in a totally different way than what she was asking me to. She said they stayed up all night talking about the reading because we did it live, and that I still check in on them and their communication is so much better. She no longer speaks for him. Like the things that you can glean from what you understand, that's the gift that I see so much in human design, is that it offers us to see why someone is the way they are. Now, we can't always see all the conditioned stuff, but it's like, oh, I understand. It's okay. You're beautifully different than me. And that's beautiful. And it's okay. But boy, in a connection chart, like when we bring people together, it's important that they see those differences instead of trying to forever and always change someone. I don't want to be changed. So why am I trying to change anybody? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It has empowered me to see my partnership. It's such a more beautiful light. And then you can even do it for the whole family dynamic, which is called a penta, which is just, layers and layers, Victoria, right?
Well, and I can see the value in that as, for a parent and a
Oh,
child,
yes. Oh, yes.
especially getting to those teen years, maybe probably even before. I mean, nip stuff in the bud, right? Do it when they're
Oh my
young.
gosh. And those are
Yeah.
some of my favorite mini readings. Like I've done it for moms with their kiddo. They're like, what? Just tell me what's going on. their designs are so different. And this one instance, I just did that little 25-minute audio file for her precious little daughter. And the mom listened to it a couple times, and she got her husband to listen to it. And finally, they listened to it as a family. Totally changed the dynamic in the household. I mean, 25 minutes, guys. Like, are we kidding? Can it get that, simple? Yes, it can. Just showing and highlighting the different ways that we show up in the world just removes a lot of conflict, and therefore probably a lot of grief in a relationship, in what you're navigating in your life, how you're processing. It's like, oh, I see how you're doing that. I want to give you space to do that. You don't have to do it my way. I was raised where the way it was done was the way to do it, like from, a hierarchical perspective. I dropped the hierarchy once I got divorced. I said, nope, we're all equals here, and everybody gets a voice. This is before I even knew design. I'm so grateful I did, because that hierarchy, while I get it, I hear parents out there going, well, wait, then who's in charge? Well, sometimes my kids have been my greatest teachers. So maybe sometimes they were more in charge, even though I was the head of the household. And that's okay.
I just had an idea. So if I had your knowledge and your know-how, I think this would be super fun to host like people would pay and register to have, you would get their body graph, individuals who are looking for their match, looking for love, looking for the real deal, right?
Mm.
And you are hosts like this, it's like speed dating, right? Except you've paired them based on their body graph. Like, wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh my God, I would love to see that unfold. That could be so much
Oh,
fun, because really, I'm just saying from what I see, because I have no control over how they're conditioned, right?
right.
And so I cannot see, what has happened from that perspective. I'm literally just looking at their blueprint, right? Their body graph of what. And so based on that, those like electromagnetic sparks and how they could see and support one another, that could be so fun. But outside of the conditioning, then they take it from there, right? They take it from
Yeah.
there.
The
So,
body graph matchmaker.
oh my God, that'd be so fun. That would be so fun.
I just like gave an idea to the masses, so you better
Yeah, you
take it.
did. I
If you
know.
want me to edit this out later, just let me know.
No, heck no. Maybe somebody will get on board with us to do it. That'd be great. We're the initiators, Victoria. We don't see this thing through.
That's
Somebody else
true.
needs to build this for us. You just
That's
let
true.
that out as magically as you're meant to. And now somebody else can get in touch with us and say, all right, we're ready to do this.
Oh, couldn't you like matchmaker cafe, like body graph matchmaking cafe? Like seriously, like I'm just like, oh yeah.
That could be so fun. That could be so fun. And again, there's no absolutes to this. What you do with it from here is up to you, because
Yeah,
especially if you're not truly living into your design,
that's
how that can
true.
unfold can be really different, really different.
So what are some examples that you've seen? I mean, you don't have no names or anything like that, but examples of how someone's graph was manifesting as grief in their life, like areas of challenge and things like that, like different examples. Can you give a few?
Oh my goodness. Yes, yes, yes. So I had a beautiful client who was navigating a divorce. And when we started working together, it wasn't, she wasn't to the place yet where she was ready to allow herself to believe that divorce was the right path.
Mm.
And she'd experienced a divorce already. So can you imagine you're letting yourself believe that you're not enough?
Mm-hmm.
I did this wrong again, repeating the past, those fear centers. That was the heart and the spleen that I just touched on, those two centers, God, I'm just going to do this again and again. And we looked, and navigated the energy in her design and what she was holding on to that was no longer serving her, and really inviting her to get out of her head. That definition up there, she was defined, and it just believing that logic and was the way to make decisions for herself, which was not at all the way, and where she was dismissing her emotions because she's emotionally defined, and where she was just dismissing those completely, which had so many messages. Oh my gosh, you guys, like what we're feeling, what our body is navigating, those pings, those like, those are just crystal clear messages that we get to tune into, but our mind wants to shut them down and dismiss them. And she really allowed herself to go deep, really, really deep. And the divorce was hard. And we looked at his design, and it made a lot of sense of where he had a lot of stuckness. He was very, very well defined, almost all centers defined. So those people don't have a tendency to be as flexible. And
Mm.
so, and he wasn't willing to listen or change or really have open communication. And so it was important for her to move past that and not carry the things that he wasn't willing to change as if she did something wrong or wasn't enough. Oh my goodness, she is flourishing now. She is such a beautiful, aligned human in an amazing relationship that is so soul aligned. And I think empowering herself to see so much of how she was trapping, like she had a lot of body pain. We talk about the hip, those kind of things. She had a lot of that. And that is stored grief. I am a firm believer that like fibromyalgia is just stored grief. And I'm not minimizing, I'm not saying, but if you can invite yourself to find practices to help, like whether it's cathartic, whatever it is to move through it, you'd be amazed how the body will respond to that. And hers has responded beautifully, beautifully. So it is possible. It's so possible. I had another one who had just more of a traumatic childhood, right? Like a lot of open heart energy with not enoughness. And she had what we refer to as sacral authority, that life force energy. So it's that gut response. In the moment what the thing is to do. And that's the center you can ask, are you sure? Like, okay, just checking in. Do I have enough information? Is this right? She wasn't operating from that. Again, head definition, she was operating from, okay, so I have all these stored experiences. I was always told I wasn't enough. I know I have to prove myself because my heart's open, right? So, I must prove I'm valuable and I'm worthy, and I'm not trusting my gut responses. So I'm getting all the sources outside of me to tell me what's right. And then I'm checking in with my logic in my head, telling me if that is right. So she's dismissing all of her body wisdom. So we kept coming back to, how does that feel in your body? What is your body telling you? Kept bringing her back to her body wisdom. Oh my goodness, how she operates is such a different human now. It's just so you could hear it in her voice and the way that she breathes. And having a completely open solar plexus, she's not taking on the shit of the people around her. That's what she was doing. She was really carrying that and harboring that, and not having a defined spleen. She was scared to death about a lot of things. Like, she didn't have to be. That's a choice. It's a choice, because, fear and excitement are born in the same place in your body. Your mind is the one that labels it as such. And so, you guys, once you can see what you chose for yourself and how you're operating outside of it, taking the steps and the deconditioning to move into the alignment of what you chose for yourself helps you move it out of you, that grief, the traumas, the stuckness out of you.
Oh, this was so good. So good. Jam-packed with information that I know will serve so many people who listen to this. I'm going to share it. It's going to be shared with my friends. I'm going to make sure that my loved ones, yes. So if you're listening to this and you found this helpful and beneficial, and you're curious and interested in human design, I highly recommend you check out your own body graph and listen to this episode again. If you're, listen to it and I'm like, oh, I'm going to check out my body graph, and then come back and listen to it again, because I will probably listen to this. I will listen to this as I edit it, but they'll probably listen again, just because you always hear something new, I think. So
When you're
good.
ready for it, right? Like,
Yes.
you integrate in chunk sizes. That's why when I do readings, I start with the foundational one, and then we can go deeper. But it's important you empower yourself to integrate what you have learned so that you're available to learn the next, snippet. And we all do that. And again, that's an awareness thing too. So, and I would love to offer any of your listeners, just like I did on the last one, that 25% off of any of my readings using the coupon code Grieving Voices.
Yes, and I will put that information in the show notes as well. Any other final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, I also have a podcast. So if you're
Yes,
curious
you do.
about hearing about lived experiences, my podcast co-host and I, name of our podcast is Love Human Be Spirit. And we share all of our lived experiences, and a lot of mine are emotional, folks, okay, through the lens of human design. But we do it in a very we try not to use a lot of the human design words because they're weird, but we try to share with you just our lived experiences while we're reflecting on where that might be found in your design, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So we try to make it lighthearted. We have a lot of great guests. Victoria, we need to have you on there. So
That'd be awesome.
yeah, it's a safe place to land. We're not teachy and preachy, but we're just sharing what we've experienced. And I think that is the gift of inviting you to move through things, is hearing, inviting yourself. I can do, oh, they navigated this, I can too. It's like it's giving permission to move through what you're experiencing and shine the light on where you might be holding on to something that's not yours.
So good. So good. And that's where we create change in our lives, right?
That's
Yes.
right. Yes.
Well, thank you again for coming back on. We could go into more layers of this, and maybe we will down the road. We'll see.
That's
Because
right.
actually have more work to do with you. And so perhaps I could do another episode and of what I've all learned, right?
Yeah.
Maybe up to
Yeah.
that point. So that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
You're
this
so
and for your
welcome. It's a
time.
pleasure. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
And where can they find you?
My website, amyadouglas.com.
And I will put that in the show notes as well. And in the
Perfect.
meantime, remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.